Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, courtrooms across the state are set to eliminate cash bail for defendants. What you should know. Leaders of violence prevention groups come together to share ideas and advice.
And I want our children to know that, because they're our future leaders.
And how a local early education organization honors the girls lost in the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama. All that coming up, but our first story tonight, how pretrial detention will work as cash bail comes to an end in Illinois, right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Courtrooms across Illinois are set to eliminate cash bail beginning Monday. That means people who've been arrested and are awaiting trial will no longer be held in jail unless they are charged with certain felonies or pose a safety or flight risk. It comes after the Illinois Supreme Court upheld a contentious portion of the criminal justice reform law known as the Safety Act. Critics say the law makes the state less safe and are concerned about resource demands under the new system, while supporters point to the disproportionate impact pretrial detention has on communities of color. Joining us now with more on this are Amadou Dramé, director of the Illinois Justice Project, Pastor Charles Strait at Eastside United Methodist Church. He's a part of the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice that has worked to reduce pretrial detainment. And Cook County Public Defender Sharon Mitchell Jr. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. So, Pastor Strait, I want to start with you, please. You've been pushing for the Pretrial Fairness Act since the beginning. When did you start to see the need for this reform?
We started having conversations about the impact of pretrial detention on the communities in which we served over 7 years ago, talking about how poor people, particularly black and brown people, were impacted by not having enough money to pay bail. And as we dug a little deeper and we started to talk to community members about the fact that being held in pretrial detention did not mean that you had committed a crime. It didn't mean anything other than you were too poor to pay bail and to go free. And that people who were rich and people who lived in different communities didn't have nearly as a severe impact. And so as we did that, as we worked our way through churches and community conversations, more and more people started to realize how unfair, how unjust, and even racist the system was that led to pretrial detention. And it started a movement. And that movement has led to where we are now, the end of cash bail in Illinois.
Amadou Dramé, what was the Illinois Justice Project's role in this?
Well, back when our now Cook County Public Defender, Sharon Mitchell, was our director, we were heavily involved in this work, and we were really at the forefront of pushing the envelope on this issue. We've been committed to this work as a member originally of the Coalition to End Money Bond, which has since expanded into the entire network for pretrial justice in the state of Illinois. It's an issue that we remain committed to today. We recently actually had a journalism seminar for journalists across the entire state with judges and advocates and researchers and scholars who were part of a panel discussion, or several panel discussions in fact, to really talk about how journalists ought to be covering such issues and how we should really take a data-driven approach, a more measured approach to really understanding each individual element, because this is a new reform and we need to work more meticulously to really understand it. So we've been committed from day one and we remain committed to it today.
Sharon Mitchell, as Amadou just said, this is something that you've been working on for quite some time. What will pretrial detention look like come Monday? How is this process going to look different in the courtroom?
Well, we know that money will no longer be a factor in making determinations about who should be in or who should be out of jail. The reality of the situation is that the use of money bond is a deplorable practice. Quite frankly, it has very close ties to slavery, where we're putting dollar amounts on people's freedom. We are very excited that we're moving to a new process that doesn't ask people to buy their way out of freedom, or ask their mothers or their grandmothers or their daughters or their churches to buy their freedom, and therefore actually have a decent shot at receiving all the rights that we all deserve as residents of this country.
So WTTW News obtained data that shows that as of September 13th, 835 people are being held in Cook County Jail on nothing more than an unpaid cash bail, so no other conditions or hold. We found that 49% of them owe less than $5,000. Less than $5,000, that's 49%. 25% of them owe between $5,000 and $30,000. 13% owe between $30,000 and $100,000, and another 13% owe more than $100,000. Sharon Mitchell, how has your office been preparing to handle detention hearing requests from the people who are already in custody?
So for the last 2.5 years, we've been working on preparations for the Pretrial Fairness Act, whether it means staffing up. We've added a number of additional attorneys, over 100 additional attorneys in the last 2.5 years, or it means doing trainings within our office. We've conducted over a dozen hours of training for our attorneys all across our county. And when it comes to actually making the decisions on these hearings, individuals will be working with their individual attorney and creating a game plan. I think that conversations have already started on whether motions will be filed or whether motions won't be filed. There are a lot of strategic decisions to be made, but those will be happening individually with their attorneys.
A 2022 federal civil rights report found that courts tend to impose higher pretrial detention penalties on Black and Latino people, citing a study that showed Black men received bail amounts 35% higher than white men. Sharon, is the amount set for bail that a judge imposes, is it arbitrary? How realistic are those amounts?
Well, the reality of the situation is that we're pulling a number out of a hearing that lasts a couple of minutes. The idea that is objective or it's based upon sound reasoning or science, whether a bond is $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, really we're just kind of pulling those numbers, I don't want to say out of a hat, but it's something close to that. That's why we're so happy that we're moving to a system that provides a lot of benefits. I think one of those benefits, along with moving away from money, is a clearer process for making determinations about who should be in and who should be out. Many people talk about the Pretrial Fairness Act. They think about the end of money bond. But what it also includes are just a ton of changes to the entire decision-making process. The laws that existed now are confusing. They're conflicting. They've been kind of a patchwork of laws that we built over decades and decades and decades. The Pretrial Fairness Act represents a facelift. And although it is a major change, and certainly it will take time to get used to, we believe that we are in a better platform to make better decisions about who should be in jail and who shouldn't.
Amadou Dramé, your organization has found that cash bails also had a disproportionate impact on communities of color. What have you all found?
Well, certainly. Well, the current system, as our public defender just stated, prioritizes the use of money as a condition of release. And unfortunately, that has an adverse and disproportionate impact on communities that are low income. And it just so happens to be the case that Black and brown communities tend to be most likely to be those that are low income. And so we are excited about the fact that we'll be moving away from that system because it really has taken a toll, as our public defender stated earlier, on primarily Black women, brown women who are paying the cash bail and putting up and posting bond for people to be released. Moving away from that system and moving towards one that really focuses on a case-by-case assessment in those individual hearings, as our public defender just mentioned, is something that's critically important if we're going to try to restore trust in our criminal legal system, which there has been a lot of it lost in our system, especially within Black and brown communities. And I think with that trust, we can move towards a more just system, which will ultimately move us towards a safer community.
Now, opponents of the law have said that bail exists as a way to ensure that people will show up to their court dates. They argue that without bail, fewer will show up. Other states like New Jersey and Kentucky have already implemented some sort of cash bail reform, though Illinois is the most complete. Amadou, what else has the data shown?
Yeah, well, for sure, I will say that in response to those opponents and those who are critics of this reform, we have had in Cook County for some years now a system that has provided text message reminders to individuals. And years ago, we issued a general order that started to move us towards a system that relies much less on cash bail as a condition of release. And what we've seen is that text message reminders, and frankly, the threat of potentially losing one's freedom is more than sufficient to bring people back into court and to show up in potential hearings.
Pastor Straight, you've been pushing on the community level for ways to help people show up to their court dates amid barriers like lack of transit. They need to go to work, for example. What else can be done to be sure that people show up?
Let me say, first of all, that I think that there is a lot of work to do, but we don't shy away from a problem because it's big. We have lots of ways that we can implement safety nets to make sure that people show up for their court dates. Cash bail was never the answer because it created more problems than it solved. So when a person is locked up without the ability to pay their bond and they lose their home and they lose their children and they lose their jobs, it causes way bigger problems than simply texting or calling to implement a system to get people into court. So we don't shy away from a problem simply because it requires us to do a little additional work in order to make it work. And Illinois becomes the first state to lead the nation and to show how we can be a country that really does help its citizens instead of unfairly treat poor and black and brown people. In
15 seconds left, Pastor. What are you going to be keeping an eye on once this law goes into effect on Monday?
Just to make sure that since this is the law of the land, that people are looking out and doing what they're supposed to do, that the cash bail system is ended, and that judges are fair, and that the opponents who would try and continue to put lies out there and talk about how this system is going to cause problems really don't avert the will of the people.
So you'll be making sure that folks are actually doing their part as far as implementation.
Absolutely.
Pastor Charles Straight, Amadou Dramé, Sharon Mitchell, thanks to all three of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, how a local organization is honoring the girls killed in the bombing of an Alabama church. The September the 15th, 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church that killed 4 young girls shocked the country and became yet another galvanizing event for the civil rights movement. In Chicago, the name of one of those 4 little girls has graced an early education and youth development organization since 1976. And every 5 years, they rededicate themselves to carrying on the girls' legacy. Producer Erica Gunderson has the story.
The Carol Robertson Center for Learning has honored the memory of the little girl it's named for by giving some of Chicago's youngest learners a solid start to their educations.
We have our Basis K program, which is bridging academically, social, emotional support and preparing kids for kindergarten. Giving them that language, right? Giving them that regulation, giving them ability to be able to think about how they feel and be able to express those thoughts. You're definitely going to see children enjoying learning. And you're going to see children playing and being delightful and excited.
Every year, the center holds ceremonies and social justice activities in remembrance of Carol Robertson, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol McNair. The 4 little girls were killed in a 1963 white supremacist attack on the 16th Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Carol Robertson's sister Diane Robertson Braddock says when a group of Chicago parents asked her family for permission to name their new after-school program to honor Carol, they were intrigued.
We are a family of educators, and we know the importance of education and a safe environment for children. And we were very, very happy. And I'll never forget that my mother just cried, after she made the decision that we would allow the program to use Carol's name. I think that it meant so much to my mother.
Program specialist Latoya Hazard says the girls' legacy continues to serve as a guiding light for the center.
Every year we have Legacy Week, right? And that pays homage to the 4 little girls and make sure that we're always educating and enriching our families on those social justice issues, so we don't forget. I want our children to know that, because they're our future leaders.
Robertson Braddock says she and her family have been proud to watch the center's growth over the years.
I think that when we have information about each other, we feel differently about each other. We care for each other in a different way. And that's what the center embeds, finding those areas that bind us together.
The Carol Robertson Center was started just from an after-school program, and that was 40 years ago, 40-something years ago. But now, look, we have Birth Through a 5 program. We have the after-school program. We have the summer program as well. We have family support specialists. We have the home visiting program. So just the fact that we came so far and to be able to serve this underprivileged community for so many years is a big thing.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And there's more information about the Carol Robertson Center for Learning and its programs on our website. Anti-violence work often comes from community-based organizations doing their best to support plagued communities, often with little support themselves. For the past few years, the Southland Rise Collaborative has awarded funding to some of those programs to help. But this summer, the collaborative went a step further and brought together hospital trauma center staff as well as street outreach workers for a shared training workshop in an effort to curb violence on Chicago's South Side. Here to talk about their collaboration are Marlon Riles, Street Outreach Supervisor at Together Chicago, Franklin Cozy-Gay, Director of the Violence Recovery Program at UChicago Medicine, and Charles McKenzie, Executive Director and founder of the Inglewood First Responders. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Franklin Cozy-Gay, give us an idea, please, of what this training workshop was like. What were the goals?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, we recognize the strength of community violence interventions and the importance of that when it comes to comprehensive recovery, as well as preventing re-injury. Hospitals in itself, through the Violence Recovery Program, are an important location and spot that focuses on recovery as well, recognizing that previous ways of engaging patients who are victims of violence, just sewing them up and sending them back out, actually increases risk. And so what was important for us was to establish a program that highlights having individuals who come from the community, in many cases are also survivors of traumatic experiences, at the very least also connected to loved ones, but having a holistic connection with our community violence interventions that are really crucial for comprehensive recovery.
Marlon, how does Together Chicago help prevent violence?
Well, Together Chicago helps in that matter by several different manners. We have 3 components to violence reduction, outreach, victim advocacy, and case management. Under the leadership of our director of the violence troop, we are pounding the streets, canvassing, being hyper-local, being credible messengers, because myself, as well as others, have come from that background who were once upon a time violent, creating chaos ourselves, and so we are returning and giving back to the community.
Charles, how did the Southland Rise grant, how did it help Inglewood First Responders do more work?
It helped us out a lot from just creating more opportunities to help young individuals around the city of Chicago to keep them off the street from doing bad activity. Like myself, I once was part of the problem, now I'm part of the solution to make a change and a difference to help other individuals, and knowing that that grant made a big impact to decrease the violence with our young youth on a different level.
Franklin Cozy-Gay, you've been working in violence recovery for a long time, and you've talked about this a little bit already, but give me a little bit more on what roles you see hospitals playing in violence prevention.
Yeah, so before, hospitals, again, they were institutions, they're anchors in communities, particularly the communities that have been exposed to high levels of violence. And so Advocate Medical Center and University of Chicago Medicine being the 2 hospitals that actually see the highest volumes of violence in the city. Us being on the south side of Chicago, recognizing that when it comes to the ecosystem of recovery, it's very important that hospitals play a role, and playing a role by also having individuals who understand that what they're experiencing is not okay, and understanding that they need to be engaged in a healing-centered way to really understand, like, how can we help you? What are your most immediate needs? So once the clinical team has stabilized the survivor of violence, then what we do is that we really want to focus on what their immediate needs are, provide psychoeducation, psychological first aid, and then eventually focusing on case management. But once they're discharged, we recognized, particularly in 2021, that our volume levels, like in the city of Chicago, where they experienced like a 25% increase, we needed to have coordinated relationships with the outpatient team as well as with our community violence interventionists. Thanks to Southland Rise, this collaboration between Advocate and University of Chicago, thanks to Senator Durbin's Chicago Heal initiative, allows us to coordinate and collaborate with community violence interventionists because they also are trusted, as Mr. Riles mentioned, trusted and credible messengers at the community level. So in what ways can we coordinate towards our ultimate goals to prevent re-injury and comprehensive recovery? It comes from case management and crisis intervention in the hospital, but it has to happen also with our community partners.
And to both of you, all of you, what does that look like? Does that mean, if a survivor comes in with an injury and after the MDs and that staff have made sure that the person, is going to be okay, a violence interventionist coming along and helping them figure out what's next? Maybe we don't go back to the community. Maybe we find different housing. What what other kind of mental health support do you need?
Yeah, so I'll quickly just indicate that it is exactly understanding what their immediate needs are. A lot of them are social determinants of health, talking about housing, employment, education, but it's also behavioral health and mental health. And so our team being a support system towards those goals, and then also connecting with our CVI partners towards those aims.
Yes. I would like to piggyback on that a little bit. Silence creates more violence. So when people in the community know of things that's going on, the guys on the block, things like that, they're not they don't have to contact the police. They can contact me or organization in their area to let the outreach staff know that, hey, this is what's going on my block. Could you come over here and talk to these people over here? And sometimes that's all it takes. Just one hello, how you doing, etc., to stop something from happening.
Marlon, you've also been doing this for a long time, starting with Ceasefire 20 years ago.
Yes.
Do you think, that the understanding of the work that you all do has changed in 20 years?
Well, that's kind of a difficult question because there's so many different models going on. But I would still think that it is an epidemic. And from the former world, Dr. Slucker, rather, I'm sorry, it is an epidemic, and it is addictive. Violence is addictive. When you pick up that gun and you fire that gun, that is a totally different rush that you feel within yourself. And the more you do it, you fire that gun, the more you're going to be prone to conduct violent acts.
Charles, what are some of the ways that you found this training workshop helpful for your organization?
It just teach a lot of different things, especially when you like on a street level, certain things in the streets that you already familiar with if you're from the streets, and just going into a training to see the way how they do it, it's a totally different look, and it teach you how to deal with certain individuals on different levels, right? Which is how to talk to individuals on a different level, because in the street way, they talk in a different manner. So doing this training, it definitely helped out a whole lot, going back to the community and letting the community know that this is the way that we really have to handle certain situations and certain individuals in that time of matter.
Franklin Kozige, what have we learned about what works and what doesn't when it comes to violence prevention?
Well, we have to tackle root causes, right? And so we recognize that what we're tackling at the community level and what we're responding to in the hospital actually have origins that are based off of policies and practices tied to race and racism, right? And so we really need to coordinate. That's why social determinants of health are incredibly important, because we find that, as you mentioned before, it's returning to the same place where you were injured. And so having a credible ecosystem that helps keep them safe, that we can try to provide access to housing, access to behavioral and mental health are incredibly important. And the narrative around public safety, community violence intervention and hospital-based violence interventions need to be a part of the narrative. And so what we've learned and what I've seen and why that training is so important is that we get to understand each other's worlds, and ultimately we're all on the same path. we need to invest more in an infrastructure for prevention that involves community violence intervention as well as hospital-based violence interventions.
Marlon, we've got about 15 seconds left. Chicago struggled with violence for a very long time. What keeps you going?
What keeps me going is knowing that I was once upon a time a part of that platform of being mentored by robbers, killers, rapists, etc. And me serving 7 years, 9 months, 3 days, 1.5 hours of my life in the penitentiary, I learned that I don't have to allow the next generation to follow into my footsteps, and I'm going to use my testimony to help guide them into a positive and productive life.
There's a very specific count, and I can understand why you know exactly how much time it was. Marlon Riles, Franklin Cozy-Gay, and Charles McKenzie, thanks to you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Friday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Saturdays beginning at 6 p.m. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.